Behind me is arguably one of the most important buildings in all of the United States of America, today known as Independence Hall. Well, back in the 1700s, it was known as the Pennsylvania State House, and it was within this building that both the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution was debated, finalized, and ultimately signed. So today we're going to tour Independence Hall, some of the nearby buildings and sites, and learn a lot along the way. So construction on Independence Hall actually began in 1732, and in 1735 the Assembly moved in and started utilizing it, even though construction wasn't actually completed. And I believe it was around 1748 when, for all intents and purposes, construction was done. Of course, throughout the remainder of the 18th and into the 19th century, a lot of additions, changes, and things happened to the building. So it did change a lot over the years, even when it was considered completed. But today it is one of the most iconic buildings in all the United States. Absolutely beautiful. You can see it has these east and west wings. Over there off to the side is Congress Hall, where the first Congress met from 1790 until 1800. It's also where George Washington handed over power, the first peaceful transfer of power between presidents from George Washington to John Adams. It's actually said that during that ceremony, George Washington was the only person smiling, which I think is just so poetic and so fascinating. All right, so we're now here in Independence Hall, and one thing I want to point out, upstairs is where they have some of the committee rooms, like the Committee of the Assembly Chamber, as well as the Lawn Gallery, where they could have events, banquets, things like that upstairs. And they actually have some pictures here if you want to take a look at that. So really neat. Not going to be able to go up there today, but cool to see. So we were talking to the park ranger asking about these heads that you see carved in above the door here. And there's also a few around the room and one above the entrance to the assembly room. And he mentioned that those are not original. They wouldn't have been here in the 1700s, but they were added later in 1819. But everything else details-wise here in the Central Hall is pretty much how it would have looked back in the 1700s. And we're going to start right over here where the Supreme Court used to meet. And I actually really like this room. I love the color of the walls. And again, this is where the Supreme Court would have met. And it's really not a large space. I believe both wings here that you'll see are about 40 foot by 40 foot. I think that's what I read. And this is how it would have looked, again, when the Supreme Court met here in the 1700s. And if you were on trial there, you had been standing in the cage. So I think I remember the park ranger saying, how innocent would you look if you're standing in a cage? Looks like you're already standing in a jail. But a really beautiful space. One detail we noticed here on the Supreme Court side is that this panel actually opens up. You can see a keyhole there, and talking to the ranger, if you're on the outside of the building looking over here, you'll actually see 4 windows. But here on the interior, if you take a look, you can only see these 3. That's because the 4th window is actually behind this paneling, and that opens so you can access it. So a really neat detail that I've never noticed before. One other thing before we actually go into the assembly room, you may notice that there are a ton of people in Independence Hall right now. That's because we're here during an open hour, where it's basically an open house where you don't need a ticket, and you can come in and kind of take your time, which I really like. The ranger-led tours, I recommend doing that first. You can learn a lot about the building and the events that took place here, but when you come during the open house, you can actually walk around at your leisure, take videos and pictures, and enjoy it. Now we're here in the assembly room, which is the most famous room here at Independence Hall. It was here in 1776 that the Declaration of Independence was debated and ultimately signed, and it's also where the U.S. Constitutional Convention took place throughout the summer of 1787. Now today what you're seeing, only about 10% of the room is actually original. The only piece of furniture in here that's original is the rising sun chair, which is back there behind the table. And that's actually where George Washington would have sat when he led and chaired the Constitutional Convention. But either way, it's been renovated and obviously changed to look like it would have during that time period. And again, so many famous events took place in this room. On June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia proposed independence, which sparked really fierce debate. And 4 days later, on June 11th, they appointed a committee of five, which was Roger Sherman, Robert Livingston, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and of course Thomas Jefferson. And they were charged with drafting the Declaration of Independence. And then on July 2nd, the vote for independence took place and passed here. 2 days later, July 4th, which is the day that we celebrate today, is when the text in the Declaration was actually approved. And then on August 2nd, most of the delegates, they believe around 49 or 50, actually signed the Declaration of Independence in this room. So Independence Hall and the Assembly Room here really is the birthplace of America when you consider what took place with the Declaration, but also the Constitutional Convention, the establishment of our government, and the framework right here in this very room. Just amazing to try to picture them sitting here and debating and talking at breaks. And you know, during the convention, there was so much secrecy here that I believe in a lot of ways they closed off the building. So these windows were likely shuttered, so people from the outside couldn't be looking in or listening in. And I think they even posted a guard, and you know, there's a lot of privacy, a lot of secrecy going on because they were trying to create a new government. And honestly, the convention wasn't necessarily designed, at least by many of them when they showed up, to actually create a new government. The original thought behind it, although Madison and Hamilton certainly didn't agree with this, they were pushing to form a new government, was to just revise the articles. So pretty incredible that an entirely new form of government was established and created right here in this very room. And I could honestly probably stay in this room for quite some time and enjoy it, but we're going to go ahead and move on and check out a few other sites here at the National Park. Real quick, we just talked to the ranger, and he mentioned that these handrails going up the stairs to the second floor are original. So you can almost imagine George Washington or Ben Franklin placing their hands on these. And I also touched on it, the committee rooms and upstairs, it's actually open every day, apparently. They have a 4:20 p.m. tour that you can take to actually go upstairs. So I haven't been able to do that yet. I'm not going to be able to do it this trip. But some of you may have been able to do that, which is great. And if you get an opportunity on a future trip, I recommend taking that 4:20 tour so you can go upstairs. Check out the committee room, the long hall, and some of those other spaces up there. Okay, now we're going to head over to the West Wing where they have some pretty remarkable stuff on display as part of an exhibit. And if you haven't checked out the West Wing, I highly recommend seeing it. It's really an important part of your visit here to see some of these items on display. This is pretty incredible. This is an original copy of the Dunlap broadside of the Declaration. And this exact copy here was actually read by Colonel John Nixon on July 8th, 1776. This is cool. They also have Elbridge Gerry's copy of the Articles of Confederation. It says, "This is Delegate Elbridge Gerry's working draft of the Articles of Confederation," which many of you may know this was actually the first framework of government that governed the United States prior to the Constitutional Convention of 1787 and the U.S. Constitution. Then they have the 1787 copy of the U.S. Constitution that was owned by George Washington. Interesting thing to note, I don't know if Washington made that edit or not, that line out. What an incredible document. And to know that this was George Washington's copy of the Constitution, it's incredible. And yeah, it actually says here, he did later correct a typo on page 4. Okay, now we're going to head over to Congress Hall, where the first United States Congress met from 1790 to 1800, prior to the nation's capital shifting down to the District of Columbia. And this first room here is where the House of Representatives would have met. And the only original furniture in here, similar to the Assembly Room, is actually the chair behind the table there. And it was in this very room that George Washington handed the presidency over to John Adams. So the first peaceful transfer of presidential power for the United States took place right here in this room. as I'm walking around the room. Just some interesting details. They have this portrait of the Battle of Bunker Hill, the famous one here where we can see Joseph Warren dying in battle. And something else that I'm assuming these fireplaces probably would have been in this position back in the 1790s. I'm not entirely sure. I'll probably have to ask. They have these really neat fireplaces. One here and another one over here, which I didn't even know you could walk back behind this. So, but really, really cool to walk around and see this space. Again, it's open hours, so it is pretty crowded, but it's kind of nice that we can just walk around, explore the room at your own leisure, your own pace, and really take it in. And they still have rangers here that are standing by to answer questions. So really, to me, this is probably the best way to see some of these spaces outside of a ranger-led tour. Okay, we just got done touring Independence Hall and Congress Hall and seeing some of the exhibits here. And I'll tell you, if you like history, this is the place to be. It is absolutely unbelievable, the things that they preserved and the things you're able to see during a visit here. And look at this, it's just a stunning day, absolutely gorgeous. And I just wanted to walk around the front of Independence Hall briefly to show you some of the plaques and other things. Looks like a reproduction guard shack, I believe. Somebody can correct me on that. But take a look at this. Look how beautiful this plaque is. Independence Hall, the State House of Pennsylvania, the birthplace of the United States of America. And one other thing I want to point out is this outstanding statue of George Washington out front. And of course, there is a ton to do here in Philadelphia. So if you ever get a chance to visit, this I'm sure will be at the top of your list. But make sure you make time, give yourself a couple days to see all the other history that's here, because there really is so much to see. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. That's going to be it for this one. Now it's on to the next journey.